The college football season is back, and the Iceman and the Coach are getting you ready for all the action this week on week 0. Welcome to the first ever college kickoff eve. Let's get after it. What's up, everyone? Welcome to College Kickoff Eve, the first ever College Kickoff Eve of the Iceman and Coach sports show. We're getting you ready for all that college football action. Week 0 is here. The college football season is here. I'm excited. Brad's excited. Welcome to everybody who is watching. Brad, welcome, buddy. Let's get to it.
Iceman, I love the intensity, dude. Like, you freaking kicked this thing off right. I love it.
Like I'm going to
And
do it any other
I
friggin'
know,
way.
I know, but it's like warranted. It's so warranted. We've talked offline and we talked on this recording Tuesday for the regular show, how excited I've been about this weekend because it's been a long time. I mean, I always have gotten excited about college football, but it's been a long time since I've been kind of maybe this in tune with what's going on. I'm excited about my team, Notre Dame, and what they have in store this season. And it kind of brings back some of those old feelings of leading up to the high school football season when I was coaching and some of those butterflies and the anticipation. And I'm just jacked, man. I'm super excited. It's almost like Christmas Eve in a way. I think that when we're done here, I might go watch Rudy, man, before I call the night.
And then there's a conversation that we could have about overrated sports movies, but we'll save that for a whole other time. But I'm with you, man. It is kind of like Christmas. In week 0, while maybe it isn't quite the same as when first college game day comes on, but it's still here. It gives us, it's like an appetizer platter for what is to come this season. And there is a lot to get into. First of all, we want to shout out everybody who is watching. And we have our first commenter, Jonah. Do not worry if you do not have a college football team that you will follow either by the end of this episode or at some point during the season. You are going to find some team that you are going to follow. And speaking of which, we're doing something at the beginning of each of these that we want to get into, and that is college roll call. So obviously the coach and I are here, and the coach and I represent two schools, one of which I went to, the other one that he is a big fan of, and that is Virginia Tech and Notre Dame. So over the course of this entire season, we are hoping to keep track of all of the schools that we are here representing, whether it's in the chat or wherever it is. And we're going to start off slow because obviously this is the first one. There's not a lot of people who are going to be watching this, but I'm going to tell you something. By the time we get to the end of this season, I'm hopeful that we have a full chalkboard here. So you might be wondering, well, hey, you're a fan of this team, and why does that give you credentials to be a fan of this team? Well, Coach and I each have decided to share a little bit of a blast from our past. So we're going to start with the coach here. I mean, my goodness, buddy, that is amazing. I mean, look at that. Next to the most famous sign in all of college football, probably.
Oh, for sure, man. Like, I had the privilege when I was coaching high school ball to get to go up to Notre Dame to a coach's clinic. And I've probably talked about it on one of the shows before, but yeah, we got to go on a stadium tour. So I got to go in the tunnel. Obviously the locker room, they've renovated it since then. This is back in like 2012, probably. But yeah, I got to smack the play like a champion today sign. Got to see some great coaches talk at the clinic. Bill Belichick was like the first talker, the first speaker of the whole thing. So that was pretty neat. Obviously, the Notre Dame staff was there, and then I was put to sleep by Marvin Lewis, I think, which I've talked about before. and then that was when the Bears had just hired, was it Jim Tressman and
Mark Tressman?
Mark Tressman. Yeah, see, that's how irrelevant he was. I don't even know his friggin' name, but I remember it was funny, and I'm all about things like character and building culture and stuff like that. But he was standing up there, and that was his whole MO for the Bears, was that he was going to, build this culture of high character people. And I'm sitting there like, dude, like, you're in the wrong place. Not Chicago per se, but just the NFL. Like, those guys don't care about that stuff. And it's like, that's not going to fly in an NFL locker room, I don't think. Just the stuff he was team building and shit like that he was talking about. I think it's all important stuff, especially at lower levels, but I didn't think it was going to translate well to the NFL. And I don't know if that was his demise, but either way, it didn't work out too well.
What are you talking about, man? I mean, you watch Swamp Kings, right? Which we're going to get into next week on our main show episode. But I mean, Urban Meyer brought all that college intensity and that Army intensity to the Jaguars, and it worked out all the way up until about Thanksgiving in his first season.
Yeah. Speaking of Swamp Kings, man, like it's and like I said, I don't want to go into too much detail because we're going to, next week, like you said, but it what a fluff piece, right? I think everybody expected that we were going to kind of get to see behind the curtain a little bit with what was really going on there. And just like the self-righteousness on display by Urban Meyer throughout the entire thing. And at one point, I started getting pretty upset, and they kind of like they got away from it pretty quick. But in like the last episode, when they're talking about going into Tebow's senior year when he stays, and it's almost like everybody they're talking to, they're teeing it up to basically blame Tim Tebow for shit not working out.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
Yes.
I'm like, "You've gotta be kidding me, like, this isn't even happening right now, right?" Like, and I totally understand because like, America kinda turned on him too a little bit, just because he was so revered and seemed so perfect as a person, and I think a lot of people kinda got sick of it being, like, shoved down their throats a little bit, and so I can imagine that if you're a teammate of his with, um, full of testosterone and ego and everything else, you're like, why is this dude getting all the attention? But those guys also were the closest to him of anyone else and got to see who he really was. So I would think that they could kind of see past all that and realize that, at least from my way on the outside looking in, I don't think that was really what I don't think Tebow liked it a whole lot either. I think he just wanted to play ball and be a good teammate and all that.
I'm not giving anything away for next week because that, especially episode 4, pissed me off so much. Like there's so much about it that I wished was different, but it is what it is, right? So we'll talk about that next week. So we did that. And you said this was from what, 2012?
That photo, yeah, 2012,
Oh,
man, just about.
man, you look like a young, spry coach. Doesn't even know that something like this is on the horizon as you're standing there. Well, I've got you beat, my man. So check this out. 2005, Virginia Tech versus Miami, I think, and that was my best man Jeremy in that picture. So that is a very, very young Matt Frates. I was probably 21, maybe in that photo. And then I believe from the same game or one of the other games, this little group photo, some of the best times I ever had at college were in the fall going to football games. And it's funny because I didn't go there for football. I went there for school and football just happened to be there. And coming from the North, it wasn't that big of a deal. So it was
What a
nice.
novel concept,
Oh, yeah.
going
I
going to
mean,
school for the
look at this.
education.
There are no wrinkle lines in this face. I mean, this
Not a
was
one.
a spry young Matt
I
Frates.
like the
And
war paint though,
you
man,
like
like,
that?
that's
Oh,
taking it to another level.
fun story. So one game, I can't remember which game. My friends wanted to do the whole like shirt off writing, Hokies or whatever, and I was like, "There's no way that America needs to see that because you know how it is. Like they always show those people on television." So I was in a shirt and I was the space between two words. It worked out perfectly. I played my role very, very well. There's no way I was going to do that, but I do have a couple of stories for you, which is going to help get into traditions and home field, which we're going to talk about. But one year, I think it was my sophomore or junior year, there was a hurricane that came through, and we were playing, I think, Marshall. It might have been Texas A&M, either one of the two. But there was a hurricane that came through, and I went to the game, no poncho, no rain gear, nothing. And we won a scrappy game. It was a gritty game, a lot of running in that game. And it was the most fun I ever had. But when I think about it as a 40-year-old, I was like, there is no way that I'm doing that again.
Yeah, looking back, I mean, I remember my dad dragging me some high school games back in the day as a kid, and it's just being, like, rainy and miserable or cold, and it was like, "Well, this is just what you do," like, if you're a fan or, you love the game, you just tough it out. And it's funny because, now when we talk about planning on going to games at Notre Dame, like, he's always like, "Well, I don't wanna go to a game in November because it could be 25 degrees and snowing," or something like that. And as big of a Notre Dame fan as he is, like, he simply wouldn't go. It's just not that it's important, but it's just not that important at this point in time in his life. And it's funny how your kind of perception changes over time.
Now, Jonah just mentioned the entrances, and we're going to get to traditions. That's a perfect, perfect segue because you and I are big on tradition. And I think with this week 0 happening, there's not a lot of games. We're going to get into about 4 of them coming up a little bit later. But tradition is really big. Now, a little peek behind the curtain, a little Easter egg. The first time Brad and I ever recorded, not even for this show, but I came on his show, Pub Time Podcast, which existed before Iceman and Coach did. And we did a little draft, or basically a draft of best traditions in college football. And that was the first time you and I had ever spoken to each other with a microphone anywhere near us. And then I think it was like a week later, a month later, we recorded together. And a month after that, we started the show. It was like really, really quickly how that happened. And so I thought it would be a good callback to get into tradition. So let's take Notre Dame's and Virginia Tech's off the board, because I think we obviously love those. As Jonah pointed out, Enter Sandman is awesome. I've been a part of it. I'm going to be a part of it next Saturday at 8 o'clock when the Hokies lose to ODU. And it's just one of the best things ever. Obviously,
Ye of little faith.
Hey, let's listen. We'll get into that too, because we're going to have the old Homer hour, which is going to be about 5 minutes on each of our teams, which, by the way, are going completely opposite directions. But we will get into that. So traditions. What are some of the traditions that you like most?
There's so many good ones because like literally every school has like something that's their thing. And so it's really tough. I mean, there's the popular ones. So it's really tough to kind of single out the ones that are my favorite. You know, when I think about I'm like, okay, what are the first things that like pop into my head when I think about great college football traditions? And the very first one that I can think of is Chief Osceola at Florida State and the spear, man. Like, and the fact that especially in today's world with all the crazy stuff that, you know, with social injustice and whatever, that is still allowed to go on. I think it's great. I think it should go on forever because the Seminole tribe is like fully behind what they're doing at Florida State. So I think it's great, man. Um, to see the guy all decorated in Native American attire with the flaming spear. And then, of course, I mean, someone in the comments can maybe tell me because I should know the name of the horse, but it escapes me at this moment. But that's a really cool one. I think that one's great. Another one that popped into my head, Ralphie's Run at Colorado, man, the buffalo, the live bison that like 6 guys just hang on the ropes and run as fast as they can and try not to die.
Timeout. All the ones with animals suck. I just
I
want to point that out
disagree,
there.
man. Like, come on, there's real danger in that. Like, there's serious,
an
real
animal.
danger. Like, if one of those dudes trips and falls underneath a full size buffalo, it is game over.
Wait a
That
minute.
might be the most entertaining thing happening at a Colorado game this year.
So you watch college football to see those
No, I
poor
do
cheerleaders
not.
get trampled by a buffalo,
I'm just
or
saying, it's
the
entertaining.
Sooner Schooner, which basically topples over at least 3 times a season, kind of like their season last year. But hey, whatever. My point is the ones with animals kind of hurt me, because I'm like, those animals are so scared. I mean, they're cute, right? They're it's cool when you see them out there, but like that buffalo, like, do you remember in the national title game or a playoff game when I think it was the Texas Longhorn went after the poor bulldog from Georgia, and it's like they don't want to be there. And those are your favorite ones.
Sure. Yeah, Renegade. Renegade's the name of the horse. There you go, Dad.
Thank you,
Nice
Rick.
profile picture, Dad, by the way. Goodness.
Okay. All right. Hey,
Um,
it's gonna be great. It's gonna be
Gonna be
tremendous.
tremendous. So anyways, like, no, I just think that it's entertaining. And those now I get like I'm sure all the activists hate it, but like those animals are like the most beloved, like some of the most beloved animals on the planet, right? I
I
mean,
know.
they are probably treated like royalty. Yeah, of course, yeah, sure. They get paraded out there in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Um, but yeah, the now I think that like things like Ralphie are entertaining, but then when you go to like Uga, the dog at Georgia, like that's boring. It's just a fat bulldog that sits there. Like there's nothing to it. You know, LSU's got the live tiger, but it's in a cage somewhere, which you know we could argue about that. Um,
Is that Mike?
I
I
I
think
don't
it's
know,
Mike.
man. Like, and
We're
then so
experts. We're supposed to be
yeah,
experts,
we
aren't
are
we?
experts. Yep, we are friggin' experts. Right here. You guys came here for it. So other ones like Jump Around at Wisconsin is a really popular one that's been around for a while. One I've participated in, Singing Country Roads at the end of a game at West Virginia is one of my favorites. Dotting the I at Ohio State. I don't. It's kind of insignificant. There's not a, but like for what it is, they really do it up, and it's something that's known nationally. So I'll give them a nod there. And then I got a few more, but I'll let you kind of chime in on
The
what you
thing about
got.
Ohio State, I think they call that script Ohio in
Yeah,
dotting
whatever.
the I. But one of the cool things about it is very similar to the way that a lot of like HBCU marching bands are, because you know when you go to those games, that's really why you're there. I mean, the
Yeah.
football is obviously fine, but those halftime shows are
I've
awesome.
seen Drumline, man. I know.
Yeah, I'm sure you're an expert. You did your own research and saw Drumline. You're good. But how about the Wave in Ohio? I mean, in Iowa.
Yeah,
That's one
that's a
I'm
great one. It's a very new one, but that one is great because there's nothing. It's very heartfelt. It's one of I think it might be the only tradition that literally everyone there participates in for like and has the same thing in mind while they're doing it. Right? Um, there's no divisiveness to it at all. You know what I mean?
the thing I love about it is timeless. So the Virginia Tech entrance obviously is dated because of the song that they use, right? So it's like it once that song is out of the relative consciousness of people, I think that it will lose a little bit of its luster and they will have to go back to it. I think the best ones are the ones that are timeless, and coupled with the fact that it's so emotionally amazing, the one at Iowa is just always going to be there. And it's the easiest thing in the world to do. That's the best part is everybody's on board with it. Nobody hates it. And if you do hate it, I don't even know what you're doing in life because it's the easiest thing to do. And so that one is always going to be around. The other ones that I like that I kind of forgot about, the Gator Chomp in Florida. I mean, that one's kind of fun, and it's not as divisive as say the Tomahawk Chop at Florida State or the Atlanta Braves. But I kind of forgot about that one because Florida, ever since the Tebow era, hasn't really lived up to the same expectations and hasn't been in the national spotlight as much as they once were. And so we don't get the same exposure to the swamp, but a great, great one there. I also love the Army Navy game, of course. I think I mentioned that one the last time that we recorded about this. I mean, how could you not? Unless you're my brother in law and you're in the Air Force. But the point being is the Army Navy tradition, everything that kind of comes around it, the camaraderie, no names on the back of the jerseys, all that kind of stuff. I love that. Howard's Rock at Clemson, as much as Clemson is a divisive school in some areas, that's really cool. And I love it when they get the student section involved because at the end of the day, it's a university and the students are the ones holding that university up and are there supporting the 12th man, Texas A&M. Even though Texas A&M isn't as much of a national powerhouse, I love that. And there's a lot of tradition and into why it's called the 12th man. And we had a home and home series against them, and watching us play them at Kyle Field, it's a different experience, and we're very similar schools in that regard. I know that we both have like an active corps of cadets and all that kind of stuff, so definitely a lot of great traditions out there. And the one that has stuck that's not even really particular to a college football game is I think it's the Washington State Old Crimson being at game day, like how many weeks in a row or something like that. It's like
Oh, like
some
forever.
ridiculous,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's awesome. Couple things that came to mind with some of yours. So like, I am surprised they still let them run down that hill at Clemson. Like, just with I mean, I'm just waiting. I mean, I know these guys are some of the best athletes that are out there, but like, I'm just waiting for someone to like blow their ACL out running down that hill. You know, like I mean, it's just I'm shocked that like there hasn't been a coach at some point that's like, listen, I really don't want to do this, and maybe they have, and they're just like, you don't have a choice. Like it's what we do here.
I mean, to be
Um,
fair, they're so crowded, they don't even really like run sometimes. It's more like it
well, it's got
depends, I
that
guess.
weird landing in the middle where they all kind of jump off of it too. Like like I said, I mean, these guys, a coach, I'd be like tripping out, man. Like, don't
Hey,
get hurt running onto the field.
Lance Berkman once made an over the shoulder catch running up the hill in center field at what used to be called Enron Field. That didn't age well. But listen, these are the most prime athletes out there. They can handle it. But traditions, there's many of them. And along the course of the way, especially if you watch College Game Day, you will see a lot of them. You'll be familiar with them. And there's a lot to be had, even if you hate the school. I mean, there's some that we're even forgetting. So if you're here and you're like, hey, what about ours? I mean, yeah, we'd
Dixieland
love.
Delight, man. I think that's a great one. Dixieland Delight, Alabama. That's one I think that's fun. It's a big participation thing.
Yep. Any of the participation ones are fun. Running through the T at Tennessee, obviously, but a lot of these traditions are predicated on a great home field atmosphere. And one of the things I love about college football the most is that even if the school isn't good, those home fields still live up. Like in the NFL, there's 32 teams, and I just don't feel like the crowds at any of those stadiums really differentiate themselves in that kind of way. I mean, obviously there are fan bases who are more fervent than others, but you understand what I'm saying? Is you go to like a Camp Randall, you go to some of these places and they are all about the university that they're there to support. And there's nothing like it. And I'd never experienced it. So I wanted to go through some of the home fields that you think are the best and we can debate some of them. I'm going to start out with I think LSU, especially on a Saturday night, is probably the toughest place to play in America.
Okay, yeah. All right. And Swamp Kings like drove the nail like hit the nail on the head with that too, because like Tebow laid out very descriptively like what happens when you go to play there.
I
I
believe all
think
that
it
stuff,
is
by
the
the way.
most 100%. Like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like, I think it's great, but like I'm pretty sure like Urban Meyer said that people were throwing like cups of piss on him as he was walking into the stadium. I mean, like they do it differently down there, man. Like in the South in general, but LSU, I think, holds the crown as far as the most, I mean, like legitimately hostile place to play. Like I would be genuinely nervous to go there if Notre Dame was going to play at LSU, which would be absolutely insane right now with obviously the circumstance of Brian Kelly. But I would be like nervous to go there to a game, like not joking. Because those people care so much. I mean, the people of the South in general, the only thing they care about more than the Confederacy is college football. And they are so passionate about college football, and I think there's several reasons for that, which we'll get to in a minute, but, it's just nuts down there, and I mean, it's just like the SEC motto says, "It just means more," and it's 100% true.
It's hard to
Places like
argue.
yeah, places like LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, um, Georgia, I mean, list Tennessee, I mean, the
Even
list
South
goes on.
Carolina. I mean, those
Sure.
are tough places to play for any school that goes in. But one year, I think it was 2002, LSU played Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, and they had 17,000 people travel to the game. And there was a riot downtown because their fans are that crazy. So like I will never forget being in the stands and this like 80 something year old lady decked out in purple and yellow and everything walking up the stairs at Lane Stadium, and she sits down at the end of our row in the student section, and I was like, "Oh Lord, I don't even know where to start with that." And thankfully, that was just her resting place until she went up to wherever her seats were. And I was like, thank God, because I don't know what's going to happen here. Like, it's crazy. I can only imagine what it's like being a heated and hated rival when you go to that stadium. So,
Oh,
whew,
absolutely, and, like, I tell you what, when you look at, like, the let's look at the South for one, but then we can expand this over, like, the whole scope of college football. Like, it seems that these smaller towns, it's more important, right? They draw better, their teams tend to be more successful. Let's look at some of the bigger cities, like because most of the SEC schools are what I would consider to be like in at best like mid-sized town, like Baton Rouge, mid, right?
mhm,
As far as the size, Lexington, Kentucky, mid, but like Nashville, big city, way more important things to do or things that are more interesting than going to a Vanderbilt football game. And yes, they haven't been good, but we could argue, like, are they not good? I mean, it's part of the reason they're not good is because nobody cares. There just isn't the support. But yeah, they don't draw well. They haven't been very successful. And if we go in the South and get away from the SEC, let's look at Miami, right? Like, yeah, the Miami had like their heyday, but like they struggle now. They struggle to get fans in the seats. They struggle to generate interest and support in the community because there's so many other things to do in Miami than watch Hurricane football. And it
100%.
just and like I'm sure they're still recruiting South Florida very well, but like back then, I mean, it was a very local homegrown thing in the Howard Schnellenberger and Jimmy Johnson days. You know what I mean? And so I mean, and there's a few towns that are exceptions, like USC being in LA, like that's kind of an exception because for a long time, man, there was no pro football in LA. And so USC was the best show in town. And that's what you have all across the South. Like it's the biggest thing going on in that community, not just sports wise, but like period. Like in Starkville, Mississippi on a Saturday, there's literally nothing else to do. I mean, Auburn, Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I mean, these towns are small towns and people are all in. And like you get up into the Big Ten, yeah, Ohio State's in Columbus, Ann Arbor's, on the fringes of Detroit. And they draw well, but they're historically successful programs. Northwestern is plopped in the middle, is in Chicago, hasn't been traditionally very good. It's had some runs, but not a ton of support. And I think there's a weird paradigm between the size of the community and the support and success of the football program. And they do it in the South like no one else does. But to get out of the South a little bit, a couple places that deserve some recognition. The Pacific Northwest, man, like Oregon, Wazoo, Washington, those are places that get a lot of support, and those are tough places to go play ball.
Hey man, I don't mean to derail what you got going on, but we have somebody who is asking for a parlay for Saturday. And I'm not sure if you're still in the chat, but if you're looking for some advice, this is the coach's record since the
Yeah,
Super Bowl. So if you
I
want a
saw that.
parlay,
Yeah, you're in the wrong place.
no, he can have it if he wants. But just know what you're getting into as we post this record. So think about it. And if you still want that parlay at the end after seeing
Stick
this
around to the
amazing
end.
graphic,
Yep,
stick around and maybe we will think about it.
I'll lay
But
one on you.
exactly. So you did mention Oregon. Outson Stadium is one of my favorites because it's a very passionate fan base. And I think about some others. I mean, obviously you talk about Ohio State, the Big House. I mean, those are just large venues with great fan bases. And I mean, the sheer number sometimes will throw you off because I don't really feel like Bryant Denny Stadium is some major home field advantage because the stadium to me doesn't you don't get the same history as you do. Like when you look at the Big House, it has it. You can feel it, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
And there's nothing about Alabama Stadium that it's almost like a pro stadium. And
Yeah,
there's
they've
100,000 people there, but it doesn't stand out to me.
no,
Just my
they've been
personal opinion.
playing football in that soil in Ann Arbor for 100 years, man. Like
Yeah.
literally in that same spot. And yeah, that does not. I mean, Alabama used to play big games in Birmingham because their on-campus facility was inadequate, and I mean, so yeah, there's not that like entrenched tradition um of a home stadium. I mean, I think sort of just their success is what has defined their advantage.
I mean, there are schools, I mean, Oklahoma, Texas, West Virginia, even West Virginia, when they were in their heyday, like the Rich Rodriguez days, that was a tough place to play because those fans, having lived through that myself, are not too dissimilar from the LSU fans in how they cheer for their team, especially if you are somebody who is for the other team. But there's like Penn State, the whiteout, obviously. I mean, that's another famous one. But honestly, there's a lot of them all over the country, and I think that we just don't get exposure to a lot of them because there's just too damn many.
Sure, and there's other factors though that play into this. So, one is you got to think about this: like an 18 or 19, 20-year-old kid has like never played in an environment like some of these places, right? And they may only play in that environment. Like, let's say that you're at an SEC school, like you may only play at LSU at Tiger Stadium, Death Valley, whatever, twice in your whole career. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like you get conditioned to it because you may only play there two times. And so I think just the rarity of the experience is at times a disadvantage. And where in the pros, I think, you're a professional, you're a little more mature. It's all about business at that point in different ways. And just the fan bases, as you mentioned, they just aren't as passionate about what's happening on the field as they are in some of these college towns. Another thing to consider is facilities. Okay. Like a lot of these college stadiums have very inadequate visiting locker rooms and facilities that they provide, which create other obstacles. I heard a story about Auburn, their stadium, like the locker room. I mean, their locker room is the visitors' locker room is tiny. And like if you go near where the visitors' locker room is, there's just overflow out of the locker room of all their equipment and everything else. And then like even at halftime, like all the players can't even physically fit in the locker room. They're sitting outside. And then the tunnel that they go to the field in is single file. So you're taking the entire team and the staff. I mean, that might shave 2 minutes off of your halftime because you have to single file everybody back onto the field as opposed to walking out there like four or five wide through like a normal sized tunnel. And just so these little things that occur at different places that create an advantage. Iowa's notorious for having the pink visitors locker room, like everything in it's pink, the toilets, the sinks, the walls, the lockers. And I'm
I don't
sure
want to
there's
hear it.
others.
I don't want to hear it. You're a big time college athlete. Get over it. Get out in the field
Well,
and
think about how
perform.
cush their home digs are in a lot of cases. You've seen some of these pictures of
They're
like these home
soft,
locker rooms, man. Like,
soft
but
athletes if they can't handle a pink bathroom.
well, speaking of soft, like that's why in the NFL, that stuff, the disparity doesn't exist because if like there were inadequate facilities, they'd take it up with the PA and it'd be addressed and fixed. Like they have virtually the same creature comforts that um, the home team has in most cases, and so I just think that there's not as much adversity. You're not facing as much adversity as a pro when you go on the road as you are when you are. I mean, like, and yeah, I know there's certain cities that tailgate better than others and everything like that. But like we said, man, these small towns, especially in the South, they just shut her down, man. Like the whole town's gonna be there. Like you're gonna have to physically walk through a horde of these people in some cases to get to your locker room to begin with when you get off the bus, and it's absolutely insane. And um, about my team, Notre Dame, that's one thing, it's a nice place to play. The history's great. The fans get excited. They sell out. They sell a lot of tickets. One thing though they struggle with is their season tickets are so damn expensive that the season ticket holders will offload. You know, you, let's say that you're a season ticket holder this year. If you could probably damn near pay for your whole season by just selling your Ohio State and USC tickets. You could probably come close to covering whatever you paid, or maybe half. And so what you see is when Notre Dame has big opponents in town, a large contingent of visiting fans are there. When they played Georgia a handful of years ago, there was a lot of red in the stands. And I mean, probably like 60-40, and like, so that's not very conducive to a great home environment.
No, but I do think, as the comment that we just saw, that the suburbs are better than the big city because there's less to focus on. I mean, Blacksburg is in the middle of nowhere relative to a lot of places in this country. And when you go there, it's all about that football, all about that football. And honestly, when I first saw the campus, I accepted going there, had never been, and we landed at the Roanoke Airport. It's like 35, 40 minutes away from campus, and we're driving. And when I tell you, at least back 20 something years ago, there was nothing between the airport and campus, like nothing, especially where I was coming from. And like you kind of go over this hill, and it was like the Emerald City showing up. The campus just kind of came out of nowhere. I was hooked. And when I was there, you were kind of like in a bubble. And it was better that way. Like game day Saturdays, especially home games, the whole campus was buzzing, the whole town was buzzing. And there are, I mean, college football towns here in the DC area, like in Maryland. I've never been on their campus, but like the city is not buzzing when there's a Maryland game. And it's just not the same. It's just not the same to me. Like Georgia Tech, having visited their campus in the, not middle of Atlanta, and it just doesn't feel the same. Like you don't get the same the isolation matters. And to your dad's point, I get it. That stuff made a difference. But like, today,
I
as
don't
you
know,
said,
man. It might make
Charmin
it.
soft is
It
what
might
you
make
called
it.
something.
Well, sure. But I'd say, and that might be why it makes more of a difference today, man. Is
You
because of
might be
just how
right.
soft they are, generation, whatever. But you're right, man. These like, I hope we never lose that. The small college towns. I hope that never goes away,
Me too.
and because there's just something. I don't know, man. Like they're all the same in a way, but they're all so unique, and there's just something about the environment, the feeling, the vibe that exists in those types of towns, man. Like I spent time in Morgantown, West Virginia on a college Saturday game day, and it's just you're right, dude. Like everybody's about the game, the town's buzzing,
Yep.
um, and
Especially when a
they're
rival comes to town.
kissing
Like,
their cousins in the
oh,
street, and it's a good time.
damn straight. So let's get to this actual season. Now, last year, I asked you a fundamental question, and I asked you if preseason rankings were something that we should still be doing. And you talked me off the cliff. So this is what it looks like right now. The landscape of college football as we head into week 0. The one that's underneath the scroll is Iowa. Who cares about them? But my point being is this is where we're at. And not a lot of surprises on here to me when I look at this list. And I don't even think the rankings themselves are the story. But when you look at this list of 25 teams, you look at some of these schools and there's a lot of change. To me, the storyline coming into this season is all of the change that has happened with conference realignment, all of the changes that have happened with coaching. And I feel like we are at a place where this season could be one of the most intriguing for so many reasons. But let's think about this for a minute because the conferences are changing. So as they are today, how would you rank these conferences? And based off of the top 25 that you see now, are there schools that you're like, I don't think they're going to be there by the end of the season?
It's really tough to say. As far as my thoughts on preseason rankings, the thing I think it has the biggest impact on is it gives you an upper hand as far as like wherever you start. Like I talked to you, like there's been times in the past where Notre Dame wasn't very good. They started out ranked like in the top 15 and they maybe had a not so strong schedule. And just because they kept beating the people that they had on their schedule, like they just kept creeping up, and it's like probably in reality were not a top 10 program, but just because of where they started, it kind of gave them an upper hand a little bit. And I think that on the contrary, like look at like Georgia's number one right now. If they drop their opener to Tennessee Martin, which is highly unlikely, but you know, they might drop,
A
to
lot.
10 or so. I don't think they drop a lot. Like, I mean, they drop, but I don't think they drop that far because let's say they lose that game and they win the rest of their games and win the SEC, they're still going to be in the college football playoff. I almost guarantee it. So, I don't think they drop that far. So that's one thing I think is interesting is it sort of gives you a good jumping off point, depending on where you're at. But where to rank the conferences? I mean, I think of course you got to put the SEC number one. It's the deepest conference. It's the most talented conference and it's got the returning national champion. So there's no denying that they should be number one. Now, things get interesting at two because the Big Ten has more firepower, right? With Georgia, or excuse me, with Michigan and Ohio State. But the rest, I mean, yeah, you have Penn State kind of right there on the cusp of being in that top tier of teams. But beyond that, the Big Ten is pretty average the rest of the way through. Now you could see some teams emerge. I mean, Iowa always, sometimes they find a way to sneak up there, just the way they play the game. They stay in a lot of games. They've got a coach that's been there for 100 years. He's just a smart guy and maybe coaches his way into staying in games sometimes. I think that Wisconsin's gonna have some potential. I mean, Luke Fickle's in his first year, but I do think there's some potential there. And, Maryland, we talked to Budge. Budge is really high on Maryland, thinks that they're gonna make a push this season. So, I think you have those top two, but then the rest of the league is gonna kind of cannibalize each other, I think, a little bit. And and what's interesting is the Pac-12 is kind of the same. I feel like you have a lot of like the top three quarters of the Pac-12 are like B plus teams, like B plus to A minus teams. Now, I'm still like I'm on the fence about USC, but like between Washington, Oregon, Washington State, Oregon State's supposed to be pretty good this year. UCLA, Utah. I mean, I think again, like I talked about the middle of the Big Ten, I think that the Pac-12 is going to kind of cannibalize each other a little bit because those are some pretty good football teams, and they just don't they're just not good enough to fend off everyone else in the conference. Now USC might be, um, and that's where I think, the Michigan and Ohio State they are good enough to fend off the rest of the Big Ten. At the end of the season, I think you're gonna see those two standing alone, and Penn State might threaten for it, but everyone else I don't think you could even consider in the conversation. Where the Pac-12, it's a little hairy, man, because a lot of those teams that are in the middle of the pack are still pretty good football teams. Um,
But
Big 12, go
the
ahead.
Pac-12 has a lot to prove, though. Like I feel
Oh,
like a vast majority of the teams that are in the Pac-12,
plan for their future.
yeah, that's what I mean. Is like they want to end this season with a ton of momentum, or at least perceived momentum. Because you know how that thought is. Well, they ended the season last year on the upswing, and that never translates to the next season. There's so much time in between, but I think it matters. Like Oregon has a track record of choking away a lot of the biggest games, especially when it comes down the stretch to winning their conference. And I think that they want to exercise some of those demons before they head to what is going to be a vastly superior schedule once they get to the Big 10. And don't you want to win your conference? I mean, USC got to be highly motivated. With the move coming up, they have the Heisman Trophy winner who could win another Heisman. They have a lot on the line as well. I mean, they didn't even make the playoff last year. So I think the Pac 12 is highly motivated for that. But I think you're right about the Big Ten. Once you get by those top three schools, how many of the other schools actually scare you in terms of contention of winning that conference? I don't think that it's there. I think that there's a lot of improvement. I think top to bottom, there is still a lot of talent in the conference. But as far as any teams that are going to make you stay up at night, like Iowa, as awful as they were offensively last year, they may be better this year, but they're not going to scare you. They may steal a game against a Penn State at home. They may steal a game against Ohio State, but they're not scaring you. But I think the Pac 12 is highly motivated, and everybody, even the Big Ten, is trying to compete with the SEC. That is the top dog in the yard, no matter what. I feel like the Big Ten could have 60 teams in it, and the SEC will still be the top dog.
Well, they get better talent for the most part, and I think some of it is the coaching that exists across the SEC is really strong coaching. The climate, man, people underestimate how much that matters to kids. If you're a kid I mean, some of the best high school football in the country is played in the South, and so if you can go within a few hours of your home and play for a national title contender, why would you not do that? I can see why kids do that, right? And then again, like as a Notre Dame fan, like I understand that it is hard beyond like the academic stuff and the lack of a national championship in 30 whatever years. Like how are you going to get a kid from South Florida or Texas or Louisiana? And they've done it, but I mean, like it's hard and convince them to come spend 4 years in South Bend, Indiana, where it's going to get down to sub-zero temperatures in the winter and just miserable miserable conditions. I've been to South Bend. There's not a lot going on in South Bend.
I mean, Manti
Um,
Te'o said it. He came from Hawaii. Imagine coming
yeah,
from the islands of Hawaii and going
from
to South Bend.
paradise. And there's not a lot going on in South Bend other than Notre Dame. And yeah, you're only a couple hours from Chicago, but like fuck, you could go be a couple hours from a lot of places. Um, and not freeze your ass off all winter. And again, it shouldn't matter if it's where you want to be, if you like the coaching staff and you believe in the direction of the program, that shouldn't matter, but it does. And I think that also plays into what we talked about earlier with home field advantage. That's one thing that the schools in the South don't face. And I don't mean like the players, the fans, right? Like if you're playing a game in the Big Ten somewhere in mid-November, the fans are freezing their asses off. They're probably not like, they're just trying to like stay warm. They may not even be engaged in the game. I mean, not to mention the impact it has on the players, but like hell, during the football season, it probably doesn't get below 50 or 60 in the South.
Couldn't you make the argument that those fans going to those games in the cold are crazier than the fans in the South?
Maybe. I mean, I guess Buffalo Bills fans would be a
They
good
show up in no clothes, dude.
would be a prime example, yeah, of
Yes.
what you're talking about. Um,
Northwestern Wildcat Mafia. That's what
oh
we're going to
gosh,
start.
dude. Yeah, what an oxymoron that is. So I think though we're sleeping a little bit on the Big 12 because
Oh, I'm not.
yeah, I mean I think that it's a pretty solid league. Like Texas and Oklahoma are still there. I think in our heads we've all already moved them to the SEC, but it's their last year, and I think though even beyond them, I mean TCU played for the national championship last year. Kansas and Kansas State have a chance to be fairly solid this year, and I mean, they added, BYU to the league, and BYU, they're perennially competitive. So it'll be interesting. I think there's a lot of depth in that league. Again, it might be kind of similar to what I said about the Pac-12, a lot of like A minus, B plus teams. Maybe no one that's like really elite, but it's a good football. It's a good football league, man.
Yeah, but the Big 12 with Oklahoma and Texas, both, in my opinion, having something to prove this year. Because last year under Brent Venables couldn't have probably gone much worse than it actually did for them. And I know that there are people out there talking about, is he the right guy to follow Lincoln Riley? And I guess we'll find out. And then Texas with Sark, Texas is always back, and they always seem to lose these big time games, or actually not even big time games. A lot of times they lose the games that they shouldn't lose. Remember last year they played Alabama? I think it was last year, and they actually played them well. They actually could have beaten them. They start losing games they have no business losing to, like Texas Tech or something like that. And that's not to take anything away from those squads, but both of those schools are leaving, but they also have something to prove. And I think that their coaches may be on the hot seat if they don't have the kind of season that they're expected to have. And they're a conference, I think, that is going to be a lot more powerful once this realignment stuff comes up. But one guy we didn't mention in all of this is Coach Prime. How could we not mention him? He's in the Pac 12 now. They're going to be moving to the Big 12 next year. But I want to say this is I know couple of Buffalo fans, and honestly, this is probably the best it's going to get until the season starts. And then once the season starts, the stark reality of expectations and actual results come to fruition. And they were a 1-11 squad last year. He's done a lot of great stuff in terms of hype. He's selling tickets. The university is making money now, hand over fist, I would imagine. But with the schedule that they have coming up, the competition that they have, and just how non competitive they've been up until this point, they have a big hill to climb. And I think if you think that this team is going to win like 8, 9, or 10 games, I really think you're deluding yourself. It's going to take a little bit more time for him to do his magic, if he even can.
Yeah, the reason I guess I wasn't rushing to mention Colorado is because we're talking about like actual football now, right? The season. And don't get me wrong, I'm entertained as hell by Coach Prime and what he's doing, and it's certainly entertaining. It's like made for reality TV. Like if they did a Hard Knocks for college football, they should have done Colorado because it would have been fantastic. But
I mean, it's
uh
interesting now heading into the season, but
but
like
like you said,
when
once the football starts, yeah, this is gonna change in a hurry, and I'm curious to see,
a real hurry.
if the wheels fall off real fast if things go south. Not just I mean, now if they go out and they're competitive and they're still losing, I think they'll be fine, but, like, if they go out and they're getting their heads kicked in, um, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, things implode there very quickly.
My concern is Deion Sanders is a personality. Like we know what he is about. And that personality is awesome when things are going well. But a guy like him, when things aren't going well, I'm curious as to what that's going to look like. Is he going to start pointing fingers? Is he going to start throwing kids under the bus at press conferences, stuff like that? Because that stuff is fine now because they're changing over the culture. But when you're actually in the trenches and these kids are playing their heart out for you, that doesn't generally bode well. And that's what I think is going to be fascinating to me is if it doesn't go well, how does he handle the adversity? And that is going to be directly correlated to how the team does.
Yeah, if he goes on national TV after them getting blown out and starts calling kids out in press conferences, like
He
one,
might.
you're gonna lose. Yeah, he might. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. And like, not only are you gonna lose your locker room at that point, but like, just think about like recruiting. Like, who's gonna sign up to come play for that guy? It's like, man, if I have a bad game, he's just gonna crucify me in front of the entire country in his press conference.
It's very possible. So that is something that I'll be interested to watch. But one conference we haven't talked about is the ACC because, quite frankly, and I hate to say this, I mean, Virginia Tech, but that conference is so mediocre once you get past Clemson and Florida State. And a lot of people are high. Budge thinks that Clemson could win the national title this year. A lot of people are high on Florida State. I know that you're very hesitant about Florida State with all that hype. But after that, it's a terrible conference, a steaming pile of disappointment, mediocrity. Nobody wants to win. And it tells you something that they got rid of conferences altogether. I mean, divisions altogether. And they're just going to take the top two and roll because that's all they can really provide.
So I think that we are selling a couple programs a little short when we say um, steaming pile of crap. So I agree.
Mediocrity is what I said.
Whatever, yeah, same thing. I agree that the class of the conference is Clemson and Florida State for sure. Um, North Carolina. Now, I'm not super high on them. I'm not as high as some people are,
No
but they
defense.
return a great quarterback. Like they're going to be able to score points. Drake May is really good. We'll see what happens as the year goes on. Yeah, can they stop anybody? That's a big thing. Duke, man, like Duke's going to be okay. Like not top 25 maybe, but like Duke's going to be solid, and NC State's going to be solid. And I think that, those are programs that are going to challenge, those upper teams in the SEC. And I'm curious to see how Miami is right under year 2 with Mario Cristobal, and if they get things pointed in the right direction. But you're right. There's definitely there's a lot of there is a lot of shit sitting at the bottom of the ACC. There's no denying that. But I
Yeah.
think that the middle of the conference is stronger than a lot of people want to give them credit for.
It's possible. I mean, obviously, Pitt is going to be a solid program. I mean, they were, I think, an 8-win team last year, so it's very possible that they continue that. But I just think the conference itself is nothing like it used to be. When Virginia Tech moved there, it was a powerhouse because they were getting a Miami squad coming off of that great early 2000s run, which, by the way, 2001 Miami team, best team I've ever seen play live. Just want to put that out there. But when you look at the outlook, and let's talk about our teams for a minute and Virginia Tech's outlook, I will say this: Budge was very high on them, and he's somebody whose opinion I do take very, very seriously because I think he does the research to know this. I've never met anybody who loves college football the way that he does to do what he did with the MacGuffin and all the research that he does. I have no idea how he finds the time. Well, I kind of do. I mean, he's not married with no kids, so like that does help a lot. But you know, but Virginia Tech is in a transition period, and it's funny because I read an article about what happened under Fuente and how bad it had gotten, and so much of it had to do with the administration not being able to move on from Frank Beamer. And in today's college football landscape, you cannot stay stuck in the past. You've got to move forward. And they did not give Fuente the proper weapons, and I think that he didn't handle that very well. So Brent Pry gets handed this team. They go 3-8 last year. It's an abysmal year. It's the worst season since Frank Beamer's first year, I think, or one of his first years. They were like 2-8-1 back when ties were actually still a thing. And they're going to have a lot of the same guys. They didn't lose a lot of guys to the transfer portal. Grant Wells is still going to be the starting quarterback, which gives me a little bit of pause because he didn't look that great last year. But I'm trying to be positive, and I think that Virginia Tech will at least improve on their 3 wins from last year and be a little bit better. But I think Notre Dame has a much, much more sunnier season outlook under Marcus Freeman this year.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Notre Dame's season. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of potential. Potential's the word, right? Potential doesn't win games though. They've got to put that potential into action and convert it into actual results. And so we'll see. And I don't think that we're going to be able to tell much from the first couple of games. They've got Navy tomorrow. They host Tennessee State next Saturday, which is at HBCU. It's the first time that Notre Dame's played at an FCS school. Some people are a bit out of shape about it. Eddie George is the head coach. I think Freeman's got the Ohio State tie, because Freeman's an Ohio State guy.
That's a
The
great
Ohio
thing,
State
though.
ties or
Why are
whatever. Yeah,
people bent out of shape about
because
that?
they think that Notre Dame. The elitist of Notre Dame. They think that they are above scheduling a team from the FCS because they've never done it before. It's the first time they've ever had an FCS team on their schedule, and
I
so
love that.
yeah, and yeah, I mean that's going to really prop up that program. That's going to be great exposure for that program,
Plus, they're going to beat him
and
by like 1,000
and
points
there's
anyway.
no harm to be done. I mean, with the rest of Notre Dame's schedule, there's no harm to be done by playing that game. So we're not going to learn a lot about Notre Dame in the first couple weeks, but I'm excited to watch them play. There's some things I think we'll be able to derive from seeing them play, but um, they've got Sam Hartman from Wake Forest. That's obviously a huge plus. That's something that they lacked last year tremendously. Was a great quarterback, and I mean, Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine. Buckner got hurt. Buckner came back for the bowl game, lit up South Carolina, left to go to Alabama with Tommy Reese, and now there's rumors that he's like the third string guy currently at Alabama. Drew Pine went to Arizona State. It does sound like he was going to start there and then had a hamstring injury. So he's SOL at this point in time. I think that's what it was. So back to Notre Dame. I'm excited to see him. I mean, kind of in my mind right now, I have them as 11-1. And I couldn't tell you, and I'll say this too. I don't know which game they're going to lose because they've got 3 really tough games. They host Ohio State, they host USC, and they go to Clemson. And I think it would. I mean, hey, if they run the table, great. But I think that it's at minimum, it's fair to expect they'll lose one of those games. I just couldn't put my finger on which one that would be at this point in time. I think any of them are possible, and I do think 11-1 is probably a little. Well, maybe a little aggressive. Maybe it's, I do think they win one of those 3 games for sure. And I also think they'll for sure lose one of those 3 games. I guess so. We got the rubber match in between. We'll see how it goes. But they've got a great offensive line. They've got a really deep running back room. They've got a lot of potential talent at wide receiver. And obviously, we talked about Sam Hartman. Their defense has really improved tremendously. They've had a couple of transfers, and some of the young guys got a lot of experience last year. So, I mean, they're going to have one of the better secondaries in the country, which is really beneficial. So, I'm excited, man. Like, I'm not overly excited because we never know. And like tomorrow, dude, it could all come crashing down tomorrow. if God forbid things go south. But there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic and have hope about what lies ahead for the Irish this season.
So that is a good segue. So Notre Dame starts their season in all places Dublin, Ireland, which I think is awesome. It's a place that my mom wanted to go, never got to go, and I definitely want to make it there one day. But remember last year, I think it was Northwestern and Nebraska played overseas. Didn't they play in Ireland and it
It was
made
Ireland
the
or London or
least amount of sense possible? And that's why we got on Scott Frost, who ended up getting fired a couple of games later. But Notre Dame plays Navy. Now, that is a rivalry that, and I call it a rivalry. Maybe it hasn't been as competitive as what you'd consider a rivalry, but certainly a friendly one. And they've played each other for a very long time. Notre Dame is going in giving 20.5 was the current line right before we did this today. So I know you wanted to talk about the history of that rivalry. So the floor is yours to kind of educate me and all the people in the feed right now about why this rivalry came to be and why it still gets played.
yeah, I'll give you. I mean, there's definitely longer versions of this out there, and I won't bore you with the details. But long story short, back in the World War II days, Notre Dame was a boys only school, and their enrollment suffered tremendously due to the war effort and people going to war. And so, and they had already had sort of an established relationship with the military through different avenues. And at that point in time, they converted the campus of Notre Dame into basically a training facility for naval officers. And so the Navy came in, so now we're talking about from a school that's just lost, 50. I mean, the only men left on the campus at that point were ones who were medically disqualified from going to war. So, all of their any income or whatever to keep the university afloat had disappeared. So the Naval Academy comes in, they install training facilities there for naval officers, kind of a little camp, and they keep Notre Dame alive during World War II when they otherwise would have gone under and not, ceased to exist at that point in time. So kind of Notre Dame's repayment of that has been to play them in a game every year. And they certainly there's been no discussion or no one's alluded to the fact that they would entertain ending that at any point in time. And I was lucky enough a couple years ago to go to a Notre Dame Navy game, and just the respect that exists between those two institutions is real, man. Like it's serious. And um, after the game, like Notre Dame after the game always goes over to their student section, sings their alma mater. But when they play Navy, they both teams go to one student section to sing one alma mater, and both teams run across the other corner to sing the other alma mater. So there's a lot of mutual respect. Obviously, the series all times been very lopsided, but because of the offense that Navy runs, that's an option offense, which is not unusual for the service academies. They've got a new head coach this year, Brian Newberry. He was their defensive coordinator for the last several seasons, and the offensive coordinator he brought in from Kennesaw State also ran basically the same offense there. So there's talk that their offense is going to evolve a little bit, but we'll see. I think you might see them attempt to throw the ball a little bit more, but I think that um, I, the, the option offense scares me a little bit just because it's hard to defend. It's really hard to defend. You got to play disciplined football. They'll lull you to sleep, hit you with play action, things like that. So I mean, the 20 and a half, right? Me and my dad were talking about that. That's a lot of points, man, against this team. And especially with Notre Dame having so many, they got a lot of pieces, but it's all improving. We haven't seen it together. And if someone was holding like a gun to my head to make me put a bet on this game, I would probably take Navy with the 20 and a half. Like, I think Notre Dame will win, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's a little ugly and it's maybe like a 14 or 17-point victory.
Week one, traveling overseas, everybody's out of their element with a weird offense. That to me feels like take Navy with the points. And I don't know anything about gambling. Don't forget, we did show what coach's record is. So don't believe anything that we say as it related to gambling. But I feel you on that. I think that Navy's always game though. And I think what makes those academies so tough, even when they're in a bad season, because obviously there are some seasons that are just really, really bad, is those guys have nothing to lose. Like they know that they're not playing for any national title hopes or anything like that. It's all about pure pride. And for them being able to knock off Notre Dame, you said that the rivalry wasn't very competitive. whenever Navy does upset them, that's what makes it even more fun, in my opinion, because you remember those days. And maybe it's not the greatest, but losing to the Naval Academy isn't the worst thing in the world. But that game does worry me a little bit. But I do think that the Irish are going to pull it out because I just think that they're a better team, and I think it's going to take them a little bit to get their feet wet. But the better teams, especially when you talk about top to bottom roster wise, they're going to figure it out. And Marcus Freeman did start to figure some things out later on in the season. I know there was some frustrating games for you offensively, but once we got to the end of the season, I was very confident that Marcus Freeman was going to be a good head coach there and get a stronghold, especially in recruiting and everything. And I think we're kind of seeing that, the foundation being laid there. But we did have a question for you. So you did have your professional model for college football. We did talk about rankings earlier. Would you like to address this question because you are the keeper of the keys for this new pro league?
Sure. So, when Jonah, when we talked about that, you probably realized we talked about divisions, right? So we would split that each tier of that league into divisions, and ultimately the top two teams in each division of the league would move on to the playoff. So you could still have a poll if you wanted to, but it'd almost be like the NFL having it'd be like the NFL power rankings, right? When they put out NFL power rankings every week to just like, hey, like if we're just gonna say we think these are, top to bottom, this is how we rank everybody. So you could do that for entertainment's sake, but I would have no bearing anymore on the postseason at all. It would be very much like a pro league functions with, division winners, and in this case, like I said, we'd have four divisions. The top two teams from each division would qualify for an 8-team playoff, where it would go on from there. And so, yeah, as far as rankings go, and people might, AP and coaches poll, it would probably go by the wayside, honestly. It could still exist. It just wouldn't have any relevance or bearing on what's actually happening or implications for the postseason. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, but one great thing that would happen is we could come up with faux power rankings and piss off even more fan bases than we do during the NFL season when we have the Eagles third all season long and they almost win the Super Bowl. But yes, great question. I want to
Hey, we
thank
had them
everybody.
third and they finished second. That's not too far off.
That's not too far off. No, but it was just great that like Eagles fans for some reason took it personally. And it's like, who cares? It's a meaningless power ranking. So that will be a fun little implication of your new model, which I mean, I have to say, when you told me about it, I was like, this isn't that bad. Like as far as
It's
where it's
not.
headed anyway, like it's as plausible as what they're doing right now. But Jonah, thank you for the question there. So the other thing that we're going to do this time, we're going to talk about the games that are happening this weekend, but we're also going to preview the games that are happening next Thursday. And the reason we're doing that this time is because there are some games happening Thursday. By the time we're here next Friday, those games will be over. So we're probably going to have a little bit of overlap each week when we talk about these games in case there's a game that's awesome on Thursday. But the other game that's happening on Saturday is San Jose State and USC, which USC comes in number 6. Caleb Williams comes in looking to win another Heisman. The only thing that I think I'm taking away from this game is how does Caleb Williams look, and does Lincoln Riley have his guys ready to go for a run at the Pac 12 in its last year? I think that they're going to. I think that Caleb Williams is going to look very good. The only thing that concerns me, though, is knowing that he's probably leaving for the NFL. You always kind of wonder about that and how motivated is he going to be. But we're going to find that out. I think that USC wins this game easily. I think the spread is like 31 or something like that, but it's a big number. But again, reigning Heisman winner, he's probably going to be a candidate for it this year. I'd like to think that USC has their ducks in a row and covers.
I think USC, they'll come out and look good. Caleb Williams will look good. As far as, making a run for, two Heismans in a row, just statistically, the odds are not in his favor. It's happened one time in history. Archie Griffin did it at Ohio State in 1974, 1975. And so, like I said, just the odds aren't in favor of that happening. I hope he doesn't, because that probably means that he hasn't had too great of a year, and maybe Notre Dame was good enough to knock him off. As far as the game goes, the question really coming into this season with USC is the defense going to be better? Last year, so the spread of this game is 31 points, like you mentioned. Last year, they didn't keep a single game within 31 points, not one. So this would be their biggest margin of victory, including in the entirety of last season. So I think they get up early. I think they kind of call off the dogs. I think San Jose scores a couple touchdowns in garbage time and kind of does a backdoor cover. So I would, in this case, if I was a betting man, I would take San Jose and the points. I think USC wins, and I don't think it appears very close, but I think that margin gets below 31 before it's all said and done.
It's possible. I just feel like everything going on, Lincoln Riley, he's going to have the boys ready to go. And I think it's just going to be a game where it's like they're not traveling anywhere. It's not at a neutral site, it's at home. And I just have this good feeling about it that Lincoln Riley's not going to rest on his laurels, even if he does have the reigning Heisman winner. So, two other games that we want to talk about. One of them is Nebraska and Minnesota. Now, from a national perspective, that game is happening next Thursday. It doesn't really make any it's not going to make any headlines. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because we gave Nebraska a lot of crap last year for being a program that hasn't done anything in a really long time. Scott Frost gets fired, and they hire Matt Rule, who did great things at Baylor before he ended up going to Carolina. And if you're going to hire somebody, I think Matt Rule was a pretty good hire for that particular town. Now, you talked earlier about trying to get recruits to go somewhere. Lincoln, Nebraska, probably not high on a lot of recruits' lists. But again, guy coming with some pedigree of winning, and he's been in the NFL. Obviously, it didn't work out. But I'm curious to see how Nebraska fares this season because I think Matt Rule, if there's anybody that they could have hired to make that program come back to where they are, it's him. But I think they're just in a stacked Big Ten, and it's going to be a tough road.
Yeah, so this may be a little hyperbolic, but I think that the Matt Rule tenure is sort of the this is going to make or break the future of Nebraska football as far as being relevant. And some may argue that it's already dead based off where it was, but I think really like if he fails, Nebraska could just slip into oblivion. And one thing that a lot of people may not realize is Army used to be really really good and win national championships once upon a time too, right? And they're not even like in the national picture anymore as far as competing for national championships. So. To say that that can't happen in Nebraska would be false. I mean, especially long term. I do think Matt Rule's the right guy for the job, though. I think that one thing that's kind of struck me about him and just little interviews I've seen is he doesn't seem Scott Frost, I think, would really liked himself some Scott Frost. And Matt Rule doesn't strike me as that type of guy.
That's fair.
He's just kind of a hey man, I'm just here to do the job, and he's more concerned about doing the things that it takes to win football games than he is about um, sort of grandstanding or anything like that. It just kind of even hearing him describe the way he, because they asked him about like his clothes that he wore to Big Ten media days, and it was like I had these shoes for 15 years or whatever. It was just this like all shucks kind of thing. So I
Exact
think
opposite of me, by the way.
sure, right. So I think that I don't know, man. I really feel good about them. It's going to be a process. They're not going to come out here and blow the doors off anybody this year. But this is a good game for them to start with because Minnesota's no pushover. PJ Fleck's a complete weirdo, though. I'll say that much.
Total weirdo.
Like just a strange cat, like through and through.
Also
And
loves himself some PJ Fleck, by the way.
sure, absolutely he does. And I think that this is a game. It's a good game to start out with because it's not like it's not a total. Definitely not a slouch. They're not favored in this game, but it's not the type of game where they couldn't compete or possibly win either. So it's a really good measuring stick to see where they're at and what kind of progress they've made. And it's 7.5 points is the spread. I feel like that's a lot of points. Matt Rule's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. And like I said, just the way I don't know, something about PJ Fleck, man. I just don't trust him. I don't trust him to uh just
Th-
go out there and to be able to just blow the doors off somebody. I mean, it's not like Nebraska is not going to be inept and incompetent. And so I think, and Vegas does a great job at making these lines like right where you can garner equal betting on both sides of the line. That's the idea. But I really feel good, man. I think Nebraska could really cover this spread. I mean, I'm on the underdogs this week, I guess, but uh and maybe I'm just feeling bad for last year and trying to give Nebraska a little bit of love.
We'll see if the Cornhuskers can sink those boats because Minnesota's all about rowing the boats or whatever the hell it is, and
Burn the
all that
boats.
stuff. Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. I feel like it's going to be one of those low-scoring Big Ten games that I hate, but I could see either one of these teams winning. I think Minnesota's probably a little bit more talented, but you know what? Who knows? And I don't think it's actually. It doesn't matter who wins, but I think the Matt Rule part is interesting. Now, the last game we want to talk about is the UMass Minutemen and the New Mexico State Aggies. And why are we going to talk about that? Well, because Coach made a little bit of a pick this week as his pick of the week, and he is picking the Minutemen, going with the underdog again. That's 4 underdogs that you're going with for this particular week. So we do implore you to check out Coach's pick of the week, a segment that we do every single week. And Coach has put his money behind UMass, who I believe is a 7-point underdog as we speak today. And UMass has been, I believe Budge said, a poverty program for a while. So that will be a game to watch. And there's going to be a lot, man, to watch. But outside of these games, or maybe including these games, is there a game that you are looking forward to more than others this week?
I mean, obviously, I'm looking forward to the Notre Dame game, for multiple reasons. I mean, there's not a lot that attracts me to a lot of the other games. I tell you what, though, there's one game on the schedule for tomorrow that's gonna be a good competitive football game, and that's Ohio and San Diego State. Um, Ohio's kind of up and coming, got a new head coach last year. Uh, I think they're gonna have a really good year in the MAC. San Diego State's got a veteran head coach and Brady Hoke, so I think that it's gonna be a well contested football game that would be worth watching if you can find it because there's not a lot on tomorrow. There really isn't. Um, the only two like big names you're gonna see tomorrow: Notre Dame at 2:30, and then 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central, and then whatever the time midnight probably USC and San Jose State um, will be playing. Other than that, yeah, there's not a lot to like, other than, of course, UMass in New Mexico State, which, I mean, after all the extensive research I've done on that game and all all the stats I've analyzed, I just really, really like the Minutemen to cover.
Is that your parlay for the week?
Yeah,
UMass
is
and
Sir Corey is Sir Corey still here in the chat? There's your
yes,
parlay for give you a 4-leg parlay.
all the underdogs. And if you lose money, it is not our problem. You come back next week and you can tell us that, and we'll add that to the total. Yes, there's not a lot to watch tomorrow, but there's something. And this is the first time we're doing
Absolutely.
this. It was a lot of fun, and it's going to only continue to get better and be more fun because as these big time games come up and the national picture starts to show itself more and more each week, the storylines will be bountiful, plentiful, and we'll be here having a good time throughout all of it. So, I don't know. I just am looking forward to this season so much. I'm glad that we're doing a focus on college instead of the NFL because I think that there is so much more to talk about in college. And don't you worry, we're going to have fun all year round. But, Coach, do you have anything else for all the people that are here to look forward to this week leading up into next week's content?
No, man, we're here, man. We're on the cusp. It's college football eve, and that's what is exciting. Thank you for everyone who took the time to listen and interact. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we kind of grow the interaction as this goes. Because, like you said, there will be more storylines, and more excitement to talk about. Maybe a little a little more contentious, a little more divisiveness, and we can argue about some things. So I'm here for it. So
I called a
uh,
bunch of players soft. Like we
you
started this
did.
off in a weird way. I don't ever
We
get
did.
like that before.
No, and hopefully I'm excited. Jonah, man, find yourself a team. Find yourself a team, jump on that bandwagon, go all in.
Yeah.
There's
By
just
the end
something great.
by the end of the season, I want to see you with a jersey or a hat or something. I don't care who it is. It could be the UMass Minutemen. It could be the Aggie. I don't care who it
Could
is.
be Notre Dame. We got room for you, buddy. Hop
Nah, the
on the
bandwagon's
bandwagon.
already chock full on the
Or
Notre
maybe
Dame
maybe
side.
you're gonna be a fan of the Naval Academy. Watch the game tomorrow.
That is a
So
good point.
uh
Well,
we're here
dude,
for it. Hey, Jonah, this has been a lot of fun for us too, buddy. So
yes.
thank you. Thank you for interacting.
If you enjoyed this, you can find us on TikTok at INC Sports is the handle. We do post some clips there. We're trying to be a little bit more attentive to our TikTok because we kind of got a little friendly with Tyler Budge. I don't know if Tyler actually came into the feed this time, but at CF Budge is his handle, and he's a great guy, really knowledgeable, and he does kind of interact with us. He was emotionally tied to your pick of the week because he saw how terrible you were heading into that episode with him. If you want to find us on Twitter, we're not there very often at Iceman and Coach is still the handle. Facebook, we were live on there. INC Sports is where you can find it. So obviously, if you're watching live there, you already know where to find it. We're on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Don't forget to hit follow, rate, review, all that good stuff. Like, subscribe. It's not mandatory. It is very, very helpful for YouTube. We're part of the Matty Ice Media Network. And honestly, we're just out here to have a little bit of fun. The football season is here. The coach is here. The Iceman is here. We had a great time. Thank you for showing up. And we'll see you all this time next week. This is College Kickoff Eve.
Go Irish.
Go Navy.